Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end of the day is all about determining how you're going to play your deck going first or going second. Now, obviously, in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a lot easier to understand this because, you know, there's so many combos in the game, Scythe go, but the point is, you still need to figure out how your deck is going to go second against that kind of strategy. And it's annoying, and you're not always going to be able to beat it, but you need to figure out the best possible way of approaching these types of going second questions. And I mean, the same can be said about going first. If I'm playing Sprite, how am I going to deal with two hand traps being like an Imperm or a Nibiru or something along those lines? Because let's face it, if you're doing your Sprite combo and they have Imperm Nib, I mean, that freaking sucks for you. Your entire board is going to get wiped. So we're trying to figure out the best way of approaching these different situations and what the best deck is at doing that. And the point of this video is to illustrate some different concepts to understand about how we're going to approach going first and going second. I think the more simple way of understanding this concept is there's 4 different ways of looking at the game. You can look at it as your deck, your opponent's deck, you as a player, and your opponent as a player. There's a great video and deck profile and like explanation of all of this from a video years ago. It's Johnny Lee's top 8 Monarch deck profile. I'll leave a link in the description. It really is a fascinating video. But the reason I bring this up is because those 4 methods of viewing gameplay is very relevant when it comes to picking your deck, card choices, and the reason why the best decks are the best decks is because of how well they handle these different situations when going first or going second. One reason Sprite is so popular in the metagame right now is because your main engine, all your level 2 monsters, doesn't actually require a lot of your main deck space. And why is that good? Well, it means a lot of your cards in your main deck are going to help you at going second. So a good example of this is Ash Blossom, Veiler, Imperm, Nibiru, hand traps. Hand traps are essential to the modern game of Yu-Gi-Oh! They help you go second against ridiculous combos. And if hand traps didn't exist, well, then we'd all be getting FTK'd nowadays. But when you're going first, hand traps don't actually contribute to your combo per se, depending on the deck, of course, but most of the time they're just gonna sit in your hand until you're able to interact with your opponent. And I mean, some cards aren't even like that. Your go second strategy could be playing cards like Dark Ruler, Droplets, Super Polymerization, Board Breakers, quote unquote. If you draw a card like Dark Ruler going first, well, it's not really going to do anything until your next turn, which could be problematic because if your going first strategy isn't strong enough by itself to stop your opponent's gameplay, then your Dark Ruler may not be doing enough. And if you lose the game on your opponent's turn, you never actually get an opportunity to activate your Dark Ruler no more. Another way of looking at this is your go second strategy could be relying on Dark Ruler and Droplets because your going first strategy is already strong enough to win games. Something you also need to consider is how your opponent's go second strategy could affect your go first strategy. I know it's getting like more complicated now. If you're going first and your opponent's go second strategy is to play hand traps, how is your deck gonna combat that? Let's say you activate Sprite Starter and they ash it. How do you combat that? Maybe the idea is you just summon a Deep Sea Diva, summon another level 2 from your deck, and go into Gigantic's play. Alright, well what happens if maybe they have a second point of interruption with the Ghost Ogre? Then what are you going to do from there? And you can't always predict every single situation and be prepared for every single situation because sometimes you're just not going to open the right cards. But thinking about these different situations and seeing what the best way of playing them out would be is very important in playing the game at a competitive level. The baseline of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is figuring out the best ways of going first and going second, and then how that's going to transition throughout the game. But if you're just saying, oh, you know, I'm just going to play 40 cards of engine, and my going second strategy is just to hope my hand is good enough to play through boards. That's not really a smart way of approaching deck building. You need to figure out how your deck is going to go second. And I mean, to be fair, there are totally times where engine is strong enough to go second. I think a great example of this is Danger Thunder Dragon. A lot of the time, in the metagame, it was fine to not play any go second cards because your engine was so strong into so many different decks. Sure, the mirror match you had to definitely side for and make sure you had enough ways of going second. But again, it also just depends on the metagame. what do you expect people to be playing? Right now, for example, if you're expecting to play mostly Sprite, then maybe you should play cards specifically tailored for Sprite, even if they're not as good in other matchups. A good example of this, in my opinion, is Ghost Ogre, because Ghost Ogre is really good against Sprite, but it's terrible against Tearlament. Another way of viewing this is I don't want to give up that many percentage points against Tearlament for the Sprite matchup, because I don't expect Sprite to be the only deck I play against, but I expect a good amount of Tearlament as well. So maybe you play something like DD Crow that covers both matchups. The point is, you need to look at the metagame and figure out your Ghost first and Ghost second strategy into the different decks, or different ways of going first and going second. And this is kind of how you look at your opponent's going first strategy, how you look at your going first strategy, their go second strategy, and your go second strategy. This was a ramble, but I hope you guys got something out of it. Like, subscribe, comment if this was helpful, and with that, I hope to see you soon.